So I think I'd just like to start by asking, who are Vertigo Films?
Okay. Well, we're a film production company, a distribution company. We have an international sales agency called Protagonist Pictures, which is a joint venture between Film 4 and Ingenious Media. We own a sort of state-of-the-art post-production facility in Berlin, so we cover every aspect of post-production. And we have a Paradise Effects, which is one of the world's leading 3D companies. So we try to cover the full process, really, from financing all the way through to the technical side of filmmaking, to the release into the cinemas and distribution onto DVD.
That's quite impressive, but it probably wasn't that at the start, was it?
No, I mean, at the start, we basically, I mean, I met Allan in 2001, was it?
Yeah.
2001, and Allan had a project, Football Factory, which was the book, and we met up and started talking about kind of, you know, what we wanted to do and the kind of things that we felt were missing in the industry. And at the time, we felt that everyone was talking about low-budget filmmaking and this, you know, let's make a low-budget film at £4 or £5 million, and we were going, shouldn't we be making a low-budget film at like £500,000? Because the cost of film was very expensive, and also the other thing that we wanted to do was make films that had a kind of commercial end to them. There was, you know, we wanted to build a business. So Al went off to Cannes, met a guy who gave him £500,000 on a handshake, and
still no contract.
No contract. And we went off, and that was the company. It was basically that on that £500,000, and Football Factory was the company.
How is the distribution business now as opposed to when you started it, from your perspective?
I mean, we've done a paper on this, you know. Our starting point, what's really interesting is how do you create a sustainable film business? And the answer is that there's, after 10 years of the Film Council, there's not one film company in the UK that is a producer that can finance a £4 million film, fully finance it. Unlike in France or Spain or Germany, where you have thriving companies that are working commercially and artistically together, you know, so it's a real problem. And some of the problems we've come up with there's some real headline problems here for the film business in the UK. The first problem is that we have the worst rate of returns from the cinemas in the entire planet. You know, an average, 33%, whereas most countries have 45, 50%. So something you really notice on a film we've done called Street Dance, we're losing millions. If we had released the same film, the same income, it would be millions in pounds more income back to the company if we were distributing it in Germany. So there's problem number one. Which we can then reinvest in more films. Yeah. Problem number two is the broadcasters and what they pay for television rights to the movies. And that has traditionally propped up the whole distribution of independent film companies that are distributors. So as an example, if we want to sell Monsters to Channel 4 or BBC, we'll get £50,000 for it, for a hit film. You know, a real hit, we'll get £50,000. Back in the day when it was Human Traffic, probably £500,000. You know, so nowadays, the broadcasters' pot of money for the acquisition of film rights is vast. So if we'd done our deal through Paramount for Monsters, we would have got $2 million for that film. You know, so we turned it down because we wanted to own the rights of that film. You know, but that is so they have these output deals with the broadcasters that take basically the good films. Yeah, it's worth paying $3 million for Lord of the Rings, sure, but with that come 10 really bad films that hardly get a release, but they're still paying $2 million a pop for each of these films. So as an independent distributor, we really need the TV money to back up the distribution campaign. The third problem is UK advertising. It's really, really, really expensive compared to the rest of the planet. If you want, and what we love about France is they banned film advertising on TV to make it a more level playing field. Here, you just the studios blast the TV with their advertising campaigns and squash independent companies like ours that doesn't have the money to pay for it, you know. And the fourth big problem area is just how the financial, the attitude of finance in this country, which sneers a lot towards commercialism. So that balance needs to be adjusted as well, I think, you know.
And Eric Fellner, actually, from Working Title, said something which he thought was quite interesting. Just before Street Dance came out, he said he came up and saw us for lunch and saw some footage, and he said, there comes a time in your life as a filmmaker where you start wanting to make films that people want to go and see. And he said, Street Dance will be that moment for you, and Four Weddings was that moment for them. And it was a very important point, because it sounds slightly facetious, but it's actually just very simple. And we had been making films for a certain market, and people wanted to see it. But this was kind of saying, okay, now we want to make films that lots of people want to see, and around the world, and as many people as possible in the UK, and as many people as possible around the world. That's just the kind of films that we want as many people to see our films as possible, both commercially and for and creatively. So it had a profound effect on kind of us as a company, and this is the kind of films that we're making now.
Yeah, the most important thing is that the money that comes from a film like that, we can put back in and fully finance the much more experimental and bold films that we're also making as well. So we have a broad range of spectrum, from outrageously commercial to very dark art house indie films that are bold, you know. I mean, it's very hard if you're a young filmmaker, because it's getting a commercial genre film greenlit is very, very hard in this country, you know, because most of the financiers would like to see much more the artistic movies that might end up on the red carpet in Cannes, you know. So if you're a young filmmaker and you've got a commercial product and it's your first feature, it's actually very, very hard to get that made, and that's why there's a skew towards making the council estate films that win awards, you know. So that was part of the difficult process, and thankfully, you know, the BBC Films took I never thought in a million years BBC Films would finance this film, you know, because it didn't take any of the criteria for films that they'd made previously. But somehow, particularly James, managed to convince them to do it, you know, and they were delighted with the results.
And did the Film Council put money in?
Yeah, and the UKFC. I mean,
yeah.
we've never relied on any subsidy as a company, and occasionally a couple of our films have had money from them, and that was incredibly important, because we didn't have. They were two first-time directors. It was the first 3D film, so no one understood what that was going to be about, and it was just this kind of fun, upbeat dance movie. So for the UKFC, and it was Sally Kaplan at the time, massively championed it and just went, listen, we'll go for this. And to be fair, without them and the BBC, the film wouldn't have happened. Yeah. So it was one of those rare scenarios for us as a company where these kind of public bodies supported us without, desperately needed. And they were great. They were incredibly supportive, and then just essentially just let us get on with it.
One of the things that just struck me seeing the two together was that you look at the teaser and it could just as easily have been an American film. Yeah. And it's almost locking itself quite conservatively into that traditional bracket. By the time it comes to the trailer, it's celebrating itself as a British film.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, Hugo, because to get the audiences in, they're used to that convention. They want to feel if they're spending £8-9 on a Friday night, they're hard-earned money.
£13.50 for the 3D.
No, in London, yeah. So that was the important part of it, to make them. And then once they were in, actually, we experienced something really unusual, which they were really loved the fact that it was British. Mm-hmm. It was celebrating the fact of it. We had many letters and emails. It was so brilliant that we've done a British dance film, and it's British characters, and it's
And I think that's kind of as a company, that's very much the type of films we aspire to. I mean, kind of Luc Besson, EuropaCorps have always been kind of influential for us, because it's basically saying, let's make films that have a kind of the American style ambition, but keep them European or keep them British or whatever we happen to feel with them. And I think kind of moving forward, that's very much the type of films that we want to do. Now, they're not all going to be dance movies. Even if we do street dance, 1 to 7, we're going to, we want to just kind of make films where we feel that we're tapping into a kind of Hollywood world, but just doing them our way, in a kind of British or European way. And Working Title have done it, obviously, in the romantic comedy world and comedy. They've completely dominated that market, and rightly so, for some extraordinary films. And they kept it all British. They kept it all kind of in this country, and they let Hollywood come to them. And we really like that approach. We think it's kind of like, none of us have got any kind of ambitions to go. I mean, it's not an ambition to go to LA. It's just like, no thanks. And
it's important that we keep the slate diverse. So I would have loved to make Four Weddings and Control. Why not? The same company can exist and make both good films.
In terms of the low budget end of things, you talked with us earlier upstairs about the partnership that you've got with the National Film School. Mm-hmm. How did that come about, and what were the goals for that, and how has that been working for you?
Well, we wanted to work with emerging new talent, and it's actually a scheme called Bridges to Industry. So when we all went to film school, it was such an exciting time. In fact, we went back there the other night there to do a little talk, and it was the Freshers' Week, and you go in, and there's 80 students, and it's so inspiring, so exciting to see people that love film, and excited to talk about film, excited to try things out. And that's all we ever wanted our company to be, just feel like a film school, really. So you go in, and there's an environment, and it's exciting, and it's let's try stuff out, and let's be bold, and the opposite of companies where we were working in previously in Wardour Street, they literally, boxed into a rabbit hutch, and you can't get money to make a film, and it's so depressing, and so we wanted to try and do something different. And when we went there, we just thought, okay, these groups of people have so much fun at film school, they make good films, they go out in the industry and spread out, and then they're not making. Some of them make films, some of them don't, So we wanted to try and keep groups of people together. So we ran this scheme. So if you've graduated 1, 2, 3, 4 years after graduation and you've still not done your first feature film, we'll run a scheme where we'll make 3 films, and we got 53 submissions from teams of people that have been at the school, designers, cameramen, directors, writers, and we chose 3 projects and immediately greenlit them.